The day my son-in-law looked me dead in the eye at Thanksgiving dinner and told the whole table I'd never earned a dime of what I had. I finally understood why I'd kept my mouth shut for 11 years. That silence had been buying something none of them ever bothered to notice. My name is Walter Higgins. I'm 64 years old, and I live outside Asheville, North Carolina, up where the fog sits in the valley most mornings. I spent 31 years running heavy equipment for a highway construction outfit. And the last 12 of those, I owned 3 small quarries supplying gravel to half the contractors in western North Carolina. I built that business out of one used dump truck my own father co-signed a loan for back when I was 28 and broke. I'm not rich by coastal standards, but I did all right. Better than all right if I'm honest, though I never cared to advertise it. My wife, Carol, passed 6 years ago. Cancer, I still wear my ring. We had one daughter, Renee, 38 now, a pediatric nurse and the finest human being I ever helped raise. 11 years back, she married Derek Colston, whose father sold a chain of car dealerships in Charlotte and retired to a golf course. Derek grew up with things handed to him, and he never once wondered what it costs a man to hand something to somebody. Derek never liked me. Polite about it, the way you're polite to a mechanic you don't trust. So Walter, still out there driving trucks, said with a little smile, like he was doing me a favor letting me sit at his table. I decided early I wasn't going to fight that man for my own daughter's peace. Renee loved him, or loved who she thought he could be, and I wasn't going to be the father-in-law who ruined her holidays defending his own pride. So I let Derek believe whatever he needed to believe. It cost me nothing. It would have cost Renee everything if I'd done otherwise. What Derek never bothered to learn, because he'd already decided there was nothing worth learning about me, was that my 3 quarries were worth considerably more than his father's old dealerships ever were. About 4 years ago, Derek's commercial real estate outfit hit a wall. Money got tight enough that his and Renee's mortgage started falling behind, and their son Caleb's private academy tuition came due with nothing behind it. Derek never came to me, too proud to lower himself to the truck driver. He went to Renee, and Renee came to me, the way she has since she was 17 asking for help with her first car payment. Daddy, I hate to ask. I told her what I always tell her, you don't hate to ask, you're my daughter. I wired the mortgage company directly and told her not to make a thing of where it came from. Let Derek think it was some inheritance on Carol's side. I didn't need credit. I needed my daughter's family to keep their house. That arrangement ran 3 years, mortgage assistance, $9,000 a year for Caleb's tuition. A couple of emergency wires when Derek's business partners needed cash. He was too proud to admit he couldn't cover. Derek never called me about any of it. In his mind, I was the old man who showed up at holidays smelling like diesel, tolerated because Renee insisted. Thanksgiving was hosted at Derek's parents' place outside Charlotte, a big brick house on a ridge, caterers and a bartender, and enough food for a National Guard unit. I drove down with a pecan pie Carol used to make, in a good mood. I'd just closed the biggest contract my company had landed in 5 years, and my grandson Caleb, 13 now, ran out to help me carry things in, same as always. For 2 hours, everything was exactly what a holiday should be. Then I noticed my granddaughter Josie, 7, come around the corner from the den with her face doing that thing kids' faces do right before they cry. The held-together look that's worse than actual crying. I caught her by the shoulders. "What happened, sweetheart?" She told me in the halting way 7-year-olds tell you things that her cousin Braxton, 15, had said in front of the other kids, that Grandpa Walter was basically a charity case Derek's family let come to dinner, and that everybody knew Derek's daddy was the one with real money. Something in my chest went cold and still, not quite anger. More the feeling of a man who'd swallowed 100 small insults over 11 years, watching one of them land square on a 7-year-old's face. I sent Josie to find her mother and walked over to Braxton, no raised voice, a hand on his shoulder. "Son, I love you and I'm not upset with you, but you don't ever say something like that about your family again." That was the whole exchange. I don't know what Derek saw from across that room, but what happened next turned a happy holiday to dead silence faster than I've ever seen. He came at me like a man walking into a fight. He'd already decided he'd win. He didn't touch me, Derek's not built for that kind of nerve. But he got in my face in front of his parents, his brother, my daughter, and every grandchild in the house. Loud enough the caterers went quiet. You want to talk about family, Walter? You've never earned a single dime of what you think you have. You've spent your whole life driving a truck and eating off my family's generosity. And you don't get to lecture my nephew about respect. The room went silent enough I could hear the football game still playing in the den. I didn't flinch. I looked at him a long moment and then I smiled, which seemed to surprise him more than if I'd hit him. Renee was already moving, pale and furious, pushing past her mother-in-law. Derek, what is wrong with you? What did you just say to my father? He didn't even look at her. He kept his eyes on me, waiting for me to shrink the way I always had. I didn't. Since you brought it up, Derek, asterisk I said, quiet and even, asterisk let's talk about who's actually been paying for your family the last 3 years. His father. Standing by the fireplace with a glass of bourbon, went very still. I want you to understand what 11 years of silence sounds like when it finally breaks. It doesn't sound loud. It sounds like a man setting a coffee cup down carefully and saying, "Girls, get your coats. We're leaving," and meaning it. We drove 2 hours home in a silence that wasn't uncomfortable, just heavy. The kind a family sits in after they've been hit by something and need a minute before they can talk about what comes next. Josie was asleep before we hit the mountains. I dropped them at their place, hugged my grandkids, and drove myself home alone. What I did next wasn't rage. It was a decision made by a man who just watched his 7-year-old granddaughter cry over words she heard from a boy who'd learned them somewhere. And that somewhere was Derek's own house. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my laptop, pulled up the bank portal, found every recurring transfer tied to Derek and Renee's mortgage assistance and Caleb's tuition auto draft, and canceled every one of them. Then I closed the laptop and slept better than I had in a long while. For the first time in 11 years, I wasn't carrying somebody else's comfort on my back in silence. The first week, nothing. Derek was too proud to call and too sure I'd come around. I went to the quarry Monday, same as always, took Caleb fishing that Saturday, and we didn't discuss Thanksgiving once. The second week, the dominoes started falling. Renee started getting calls, first her mother-in-law, then Derek's brother, then Derek himself, and I could hear in her voice the tone had shifted from cold to frantic. On a Tuesday, Renee came by still in her scrubs, a look on her face I hadn't seen since Carol's funeral. Not sad exactly. Done. Derek's mother cornered me in the break room, she told me. Told me I was letting my father punish the whole family over Derek, getting a little heated at a holiday dinner. I asked what she'd said back. Renee looked at me steady. I told her the truth, Daddy, all of it. She needed to hear it, and I'm done protecting Derek from the consequences of his own mouth. She walked me through it on my back porch that evening, sweet tea going warm between us. When Derek's mother finished sighing about family loyalty, Renee had looked her dead in the eye. It was never Derek's family carrying us, Linda. It was my father's money that kept our house and paid for Caleb's school, every dollar. And he let Derek believe it came from somewhere else because he didn't want the drama of Derek knowing the truth. He's been protecting your son's pride for 3 years while your son called him a charity case at your own dinner table. My father built 3 quarries out of one used dump truck. Derek's business has been underwater for 4 years, and nobody noticed because my father was quietly bailing it out. Derek's mother, Renee said, went white as the tablecloth. I looked out at the yard where Caleb had been kicking a soccer ball that morning and felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, exactly. Just the weight of being truly seen by your own child. What Renee didn't know yet was that I'd made 2 calls of my own that week. The first was to my attorney, Patricia, who's handled every contract my company has signed for 15 years. I told her what happened at that dinner table in front of witnesses who'd confirm every word, and asked her to draft a formal letter notifying Derek's business partners that certain personal loans I'd extended to cover his firm's cash shortfalls were being called due in full. Effective immediately, per the terms of the agreement Derek had signed and never expected me to enforce. Because 18 months back, when his firm nearly went under, Renee had come to me one more time, and I'd wired $40,000 directly into the business account. structured as a private loan with a note Derek signed without reading closely, the way prideful men sign things when they don't want to seem desperate. He thought it came from a silent partner. It came from a retired truck driver he thought couldn't add two numbers together. The second call was to that partner, Greg, met once at a golf outing Derek dragged me to. I told him plainly I was calling my note, and suggested he take a hard look at how Derek had represented the firm's finances to me when he'd asked for that loan, because I had emails. 10 days later, Derek called me directly for the first time in 11 years. I almost didn't answer. "Walter, look, I think we should sit down, clear the air. Dinner somewhere nice." My treat, his treat. I nearly laughed in my own driveway. "Sure, Derek. Let's sit down." They picked a restaurant on the Blue Ridge Parkway, a dining room overlooking 60 miles of ridgeline, the kind of view meant to do a room's emotional work for it. Renee and I got there first, watched the light go gold over the mountains. Derek arrived 11 minutes late with his father, Harold, in tow, which told me plenty. We ordered. Derek got a scotch. I got the ribeye, no reason to let the occasion spoil my appetite. 4 minutes of small talk, then Derek cleared his throat. "Look, Walter, what I said at Thanksgiving was out of line, and I apologize." A glance at his father, who nodded on cue. "But calling in that loan the way you did, that's not how family handles things. You could sink my whole firm." Over hurt feelings? Then the line he'd clearly rehearsed. "It feels like you're punishing me for one bad moment at dinner." I let the silence sit, took a slow sip of water. "Derek, you didn't invite me here to apologize. You invited me because you can't cover that note." He blinked. "What?" "No, Walter, you're not sorry for what you said in front of 6 children," I told him. "You're sorry I'm the one holding the paper." Harold set his fork down. "Now hold on, son. I'm not finished," I said, quiet, no heat in it. Harold stopped talking. "For 11 years, I let you believe whatever story was easiest to swallow. That Renee's family had money set aside, that your partner had a silent friend with deep pockets. I let you keep your pride because I loved my daughter more than I cared about being understood. That ends tonight. I have the loan documents you signed. I have the emails describing your firm's finances in terms your own partners are going to find very interesting when Patricia's letter reaches them Monday. That's not a threat, son. That's just the timeline." Derek's face went the color of the tablecloth. "Walter, please, we'll lose the firm. We could lose the house. You should have thought about that before you told a room full of my grandchildren I never earned a dime in my life." Renee reached over and took my hand under the table. Harold tried the charm again. "We're family here. Surely we can work something out," and I looked at him steady. "Harold, I've been quietly keeping a roof over those same grandchildren's heads for 3 years, while your son called me a truck driver living off your charity. I think we have very different ideas about who's been protecting this family." Derek's composure finally cracked all the way. "Walter, I'm asking you. I'll apologize publicly however you want. Just don't send that letter." I stood, buttoned my jacket. "I spent 11 years protecting your pride, Derek. That's over now. From here on, I only protect my own family." I looked at Renee. She rose without hesitation, and we walked out past the gold light dying over the ridgeline. We didn't talk for the first few minutes of the drive down the parkway. Then Renee said, "Good luck paying for dinner," and started laughing, the real kind, the kind I hadn't heard from her since before Carol got sick. I laughed most of the way down that mountain, too. Here's what happened after. Derek's partners did exactly what I expected once Patricia's letter landed, opened their own books, and found enough daylight between what Derek told me and what he'd told them that the firm dissolved. Inside 2 months, Derek out entirely. He and Renee worked out a smaller loan through Harold, which meant Harold finally had to write a check of his own. Caleb switched from the private academy into public middle school, which he actually prefers since his neighborhood friends are there. About 2 months later, Braxton sent Josie a handwritten apology card, not the calculated kind his uncle performed at that restaurant, but the clumsy, real kind of 15-year-old writes when somebody sat him down and explained what he actually said. I kept that card. It reminded me the boy wasn't the villain. He just repeated something he heard at somebody else's table. I never gloated. Not to Derek's family, not to my own friends. That was never what this was about. It was about stopping something, not winning something. Josie asked me one evening out of nowhere while we glued together a solar system diorama for school. Grandpa, are we still a real family even though Daddy and you got in trouble? I set down the glue stick. Come here. She climbed into my lap the way she still can for a little while longer, and I held her the way I've held her since the day she was born. We are the realest family there is, I told her. You hear me? She thought about it with that serious little face kids get. Yeah, okay. Then she went right back to gluing Saturn's rings on crooked because that's what 7-year-olds do. They trust you and they move on. 11 years of silence. 11 years of writing checks nobody knew came from me. Sitting quiet at the end of tables, while a man who never built a single thing with his own hands called me small. And in the end, all it took was one comment about a truck driver who never earned his keep, one smile, and an old man finally deciding he was done protecting the wrong people's comfort. My name is Walter Higgins. I'm 64 years old. I live up in the hills outside Asheville, and every single person who calls me daddy or grandpa knows exactly what I'm made of now. That's what a real father does. He carries the weight quietly, right up until the day somebody makes him set it down in front of everybody.